So one of the great things about Tofu Scramble is how incredibly simple it is. Most of the time you just take some firm tofu, drain it, mash it up with a little bit of turmeric and some black salt, throw it in a frying pan with a touch of oil, fry it for just a moment, top it with some black pepper, and you have yourself a tofu scramble. I mean, and then look, that's your tofu scramble. That is your basic, super easy, super simple, just absolutely delicious. You really can't beat the simplicity of this, but wouldn't it be nice to make this better? I think so. Now, over the years, loads of chefs have tried to make the tofu scramble better just by adding different things to it. You can add nutritional yeast, you can flavor it up in a million different variations. There's only so many things that you could do to flavor the tofu scramble. But I felt like it was finally time to upgrade it, just to add a little bit extra to it, put in that little pinch more of effort to really upgrade the consistency of a tofu scramble. It already tastes like eggs to me, but the consistency is off. So this is the part today where we are going to finally make the tofu scramble better. To really upgrade the texture of the tofu scramble, we have to add two different textures to it. That's one of the big things. There's, soft and bitey texture and chewy and like creamy texture. We kind of want to make this egg like a creamy egg. So we're gonna start off with extra firm tofu again. We're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna drain it, throw it into a mixing bowl, and then squash it with a potato masher or a fork. And then we're gonna work on the liquid part of this recipe, which is gonna include kappa carrageenan. Now, before we move forward, kappa carrageenan comes from a red seaweed. This specific red seaweed that kappa carrageenan is made out of is food safe. There's lots of studies about carrageenan and the safety of it. Please check the sources of those studies that talk about carrageenan and make sure that they're talking about the very specific carrageenan that we're gonna be using in food. There are different types of carrageenans that all come from very specific types of seaweeds, brown seaweed, red seaweed. Some of those carrageenans happen to not be food safe. Those are not the kinds that we're using. So to the best of my knowledge, to everything I know, this is safe, but do your own research. I did mine, so I think you should do yours. But we're gonna start with some cashew milk. I'm gonna use a half of a cup of cashew milk, shaken, I didn't shake it. Now, using cashew milk is incredibly important. You don't have to use cashew milk. You can use just plain water. You can use like a broth if you have like a vegetable broth or something, if you just don't want to use the cashew milk. I like mine to be very extra creamy, so I think that's why I'm gonna go with the milk, kind of in your normal like egg where you add a little bit of milk to your eggs just to make it creamier. I'm gonna do the same thing here. Now I'm gonna add a half of a teaspoon of turmeric to the tofu directly, and about a half of a teaspoon of turmeric to my liquid broth. Half a teaspoon kala namak, which is the black salt. Very sulfury, very egg tasting. This is really the flavor of the whole thing, is that kala namak. And then for this recipe, we're gonna add the chicken back into the egg. We're gonna add about a quarter teaspoon of chicken broth. This is chicken broth that doesn't contain any sort of chicken or animal product. This is a vegan chicken broth. And then a half teaspoon of the kappa carrageenan. Go ahead and mix this up. If you have a little immersion blender, that's gonna work a lot better. I'm just using this milk frother that I have. I wanna give this tofu a little stir to kind of get that coloring of the turmeric mixed through in there. And then let's add our broth here, our flavoring, and everything that's gonna make this tofu scramble better. Now, the one thing that I wanted to add, and I completely forgot, is I'm gonna add a pinch of mushroom powder. This is just gonna add just a little bit more richness to it. It's kind of like an MSG. It's just gonna kind of boost those umami flavors. This isn't MSG, it's just mushroom powder. If you don't have mushroom powder, or just use a tablespoon of nutritional yeast. Now, carrageenan hydrates and actually activates under the presence of either calcium or potassium. Now, tofu is loaded with calcium and potassium, so we're gonna be just fine. The kappa carrageenan will activate. Now, it doesn't really start working, it doesn't hydrate until it hits about 158 degrees. Once it's activated, once it's fully hydrated, you can then remove it from the heat, and then it will start to set at around 140 degrees Fahrenheit. So it sets very quickly. As soon as that temperature drops, that's when it really thickens up. So same thing, I'm just gonna heat a frying pan with a touch of oil in it, maybe about a tablespoon or so. If you don't wanna use oil, you can totally use like a veggie broth or something like that. You don't have to use oil in this recipe. We're gonna make sure that it gets hot. We're gonna see it kind of like simmer a bit. You should see a little bit of a boil. Once it was simmering and a lot of the liquid cooked down, I then took it off of the heat and allowed it to rest for about 10 minutes. You could see I kept checking the temperature. I don't think it's something that you have to do. After about 10 minutes, it starts to come down and heat. I was slowly mixing it and trying to fluff it up the entire time. And the longer I waited, the more it would fluff, the more it would come together into this perfect egg-like consistency. This is the tofu scramble upgraded. And it's not falling apart. This isn't like little bits of tofu. This is one solid piece of tofu that's juicy. Won't end up tasting like an overcooked egg, you know, all dried out like most tofu scrambles do. This tastes like an egg. Okay, so I know you've had a tofu scramble before, but this is just a regular tofu scramble.
Okay.
Give it a taste. Now, look at the consistency.
Yeah, it looks like eggs.
It looks like eggs.
Yeah.
But the consistency is these little tiny broken apart pieces, right?
Yes.
Try it.
Okay.
It's good.
Good, yeah, it tastes like eggs.
Yeah, it's a good scramble.
Delicious.
So this one should have similar taste, but look at what is the consistency doing?
No, it's bigger. It looks like actual egg.
It's holding together.
Yeah. Okay. This one's so much better.
So much better.
This one like really tastes like egg.
I feel like you want to like walk away with this.
I do.